This podcast is brought to you by ShortsTV and is not affiliated with the Oscars or the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences in any way.
Hello and welcome. You're listening to the ShortsTV Podcast, and I'm Carter Pilcher, and I'm joined by the ever-vivacious Rasha Goel. Rasha, great to see you.
Ooh, vivacious. I like that description, Carter. Hello. Always exciting to be here. You know what is even more exciting? We are so close to the nominations. I cannot wait.
Can't wait. Next Monday it is. People finished on Wednesday voting at the last second. 4 days of waiting. It's nail-biting. But in the meantime, we've managed to speak to a couple of filmmakers from two different films.
Yeah, we're speaking to two filmmakers from the animated short film category. So we spoke to the director and producer of Out, which is a Disney Pixar film that tells a story of a man that's struggling to come out to his parents. Definitely something new there.
Wow, quite a groundbreaker for Pixar. And Kapaemahu, an animation from Hawaii that tells the tale of a group of healers who embody both male and female spirits. Just a beautiful short.
Speaking of beautiful, it was actually raining in Oahu at the time, so we get one of the filmmakers, you can hear the sounds in the back. But what's so wonderful is that both of these stories have come from the LGBTQ plus communities in the same category. And I think this is probably one of the first times we're seeing that.
Well, I think, it is interesting that because of the pandemic, audiences are definitely more attuned, better able to listen to stories that they wouldn't normally have time to listen to. And they came at kind of a perfect time. All of these very different stories, and especially these two stories, coming both from the LGBTQ plus community. They tell their stories in different ways, but they're both tackling this challenge that people face from a shared perspective, in a sense.
And if Kapaemahu is nominated, it's going to be the first Native Hawaiian film to be nominated for an Oscar. Big deal.
Definitely, we're taking the next podcast to Hawaii if they get nominated.
Ooh, Carter, okay, you said it, I heard it, so I'm going to hold you to it.
Let's hear the interview from rainy Hawaii.
Aloha, my name is Hinalei Moana Wong Kalu, and I come to you from Nu'uanu, Oahu, here in the islands of Hawaii, and I am privileged to be co-producer and co-director on our film, Kapaemahu.
Aloha, my name is Joe Wilson, and I'm co-producer-director with Hinalei Moana of Kapaemahu, and I'm based just across the island from Hina on North Shore, Oahu.
Aloha, everyone. I'm Dean Hamer, part of the team. Along the way, we've had some wonderful collaborators. The animation is done by Daniel Sousa, and the chanter is the remarkable Kaumakaiva Kanakaole.
Thank you all for being here with us. It is such a pleasure. We are so excited to be talking about this compelling animated film. Hinalei Moana, let's start off with you. Tell us the concept and the meaning of the title.
The title, Kapaemahu, speaks to one of the names of the four legendary healers that come from the Southern Islands, ancestral home of the Kanaka of Hawaii. Kapaemahu, along with the other three healers, come to bring wondrous array of healing skill and knowledge that benefits the people here in these islands greatly. And therefore, we chose Kapaemahu for the title of our film.
And on that note too, Hina, the word mahu, can we just talk about that for a few minutes? Because I think it really dives deeper into embracing the male and the female aspects of an individual. I know that here in the West we use the term transgender, but I felt like when I was researching this a little bit more that mahu went a little bit deeper. So I would love to get your perspective on that.
The word mahu speaks to not only the physical aspect of an individual, and if that individual was mahu physically, that meant that they had either been born with a non-definitive nature of whether they were specifically male or specifically female. But Bahu also, there's an element of that nature of duality, possessing elements mentally, emotionally, spiritually, male and female. That's that's what Mahu is really speaking to.
Right. Joe, I'm going to jump to you to start with. Talk to us a little bit about how the three of you came together and worked together in making this film.
Well, the story of how Hina, Dean, and I met actually begins in my hometown of Oil City, Pennsylvania, of all places, which is conservative community in, kind of Rust Belt, US, where back in 2004, when Dean and I got married, the wedding announcement for our marriage went into the newspaper of my little hometown. And there was a huge backlash and reaction against the visibility of a gay couple in a very conservative community. That set us off on a course of making a documentary film about an amazing community of people in that town who were working to create visibility and show what the struggle for fairness and equality looks like in a conservative community. So that film became a big kind of tool for community engagement, and Dean and I traveled all across the country doing, community dialogues, etc. And one school in Hawaii, here in urban Honolulu, Farrington High School, created an amazing event that drew us out here to bestow an award on that school for the amazing work they were doing to raise visibility and create dialogue in their own community. And at that event, we met Hinalei Moana Wangkalu. And she revealed to us the amazing kind of perspectives, Hawaiian perspectives on these issues. And she was embarking on a year in her life that was going to be quite transformational, and she invited us on a journey as documentary filmmakers to kind of use her own story to help illuminate these issues. And that began an amazing journey for all of us, which became the film Kumahina, a documentary film that was aired on PBS.
Beautiful. And then for this film, talk to us a little bit more about the inner workings of the filmmaking part, because it's a story that's told through animation. It's in 2D, yet it's very compelling and touching. It almost seems like there's paintings that are put together, and you've got the beautiful chants that somehow stay with your heart. There are a lot of different components to this film. I'd love to hear from all three of you actually on this one.
Well, as we were making Kumuhina, we realized that Hina wasn't just a good film subject. She was also a good storyteller herself and was sort of directing us by what she was doing. So 10 years later, when Hina suggested that she would like to direct Kapaemahu, she became the leader and the writer of the script, and we became more the people to translate that into filmic terms. Quickly, we realized animation would be the most powerful way to show it, because we're talking about characters that are larger than life. They're based on real people, but they have these superpowers as well. And you wouldn't want to even try to cast a film like that. Better to show those figures and those concepts through animation.
Hina, for you, what was the most important element to you in working with Joe and Dean? When you were creating this film, what did you want to make sure was understood by the audience through animation?
I wanted to make sure that the Kanaka worldview was expressed through the lens of someone whom has the ability to speak our language. That's important because we see throughout history when people are not only colonized in the way of education, but also perhaps in religious and spiritual beliefs as well. There's a great disservice done to the rendering, the articulation of our history unfiltered through the biases of the outside perspectives.
It's so exciting to see that this film has been shortlisted for an Oscar nomination. And so I would love to know from each one of you, if it were to be nominated, what that would mean to each one of you on a personal level.
The nomination and subsequent potential success to receive an Oscar award, any other award, only means something to me because it would serve, ideally and very hopefully, to uplift the name of Hawaii, the honor, the dignity, and the respect of my people. Our language, our culture, and our history would be highlighted and would be presented as my people have always wanted to see. That's the only reason why receiving any award or commendation would be significant for me.
Thank you. And how about for you both?
I think for us, it would be really exciting because there are so many more wonderful stories that remain to be told from this part of the world. There's so many stories of the Pacific. There's so many stories of queer lives that haven't been told. And there's always this feeling that, oh, that's not going to be popular enough. That's too small an audience. I think getting a nomination for an Oscar would say, hey, there is a wider interest in these stories. And we and others are ready to make them. So that would be exciting.
I agree with you, and I do hope it will be an eye opener for many people to understand, the community, the culture, the history of the islands. Like you said, from a Westerner perspective, it is different. I don't think we fully understand when we go to Hawaii, and that is very important. When you do a story such as this one, especially through animation, I mean, do you have to be very clear getting into the process to know that, okay, every shot needs to be like this? Or were there moments that you would go back and have to recreate? Talk to us a little bit more about the actual animation process.
The animation process started with laying out the script based on the original manuscript and the storyline. And then the visuals grew out of the realization that somehow they should reflect the stone, somehow they should reflect the legendary nature of the characters. We didn't know how that should be done exactly. So as a process of the animator drawing a few frames and us looking at them and going back, as soon as we saw the monumental shapes that Daniel was making, and the way that they reflected Polynesian tiki and sculpture, even though he hadn't used that to base on them, I think as soon as we and Hina saw that, we're like, oh yes, that's the shape, that's the look that we want.
Could you comment a little bit on the chanting that was used in the film and incorporating that element? Because it's definitely something very different, I can imagine, for a lot of viewers.
Yes, we are very thankful and very privileged to have the support of Kaumakaiva Kanakaole from Hawaii Island, whom descends from a long line of practitioners of the hula and scholars of Hawaiian knowledge. And Kaumakaiva herself is an artist, a composer, a teacher. I come from an oral culture and tradition, and it is understood by my people that many of the bits and pieces of knowledge that are passed down through history, through time, are passed down in the form of chant. And there are different ways, different forms of chant itself. However, the primary understanding is that this is the way that we recount information that has been recorded. So it was only appropriate that it be included as a focal point, within this animated short.
Thank you. Joe and Dean, I mean, you'd mentioned Pennsylvania earlier, and we know what it's been like for the LGBTQ community here in the United States. Would you say that the concept of Mahu is more openly accepted or acknowledged in Hawaii in comparison to the US?
So generally here, most people, particularly Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders, it's just part of their common knowledge and understanding. But it's also weighted with what the dominant American culture has done to how people see, understand, and feel about people who live now in, outside the gender binary or in kind of what we now call the LGBTQ spectrum. And it can often be a negative. So the term Mahu over the decades here has become often a pejorative, like the word queer or faggot or things like that. And so it's kind of mixed, right? It's generally understood, but it's also still used as a way to hurt, harass, target and marginalize people. People like Hina, people of Hina's generation who have kind of lived much more openly and become visible, figures, not just because of who they are, but because of what they do. I mean, Hina's an amazing composer and a cultural advocate and, a teacher and all these things. So she's recognized for all these other talents that she has. And she has chosen to also say, yes, but I'm also Mahu. And that, like her and other people that have chosen to live their lives more openly, have created opportunities for people to come to better understandings of what it means to be Mahu. And so that word is being reclaimed and slowly shifting to being accepted as a more positive, kind of understanding here. So that's all happening now.
I tell you, it's truly been a pleasure to speak with all three of you. And thank you. Thank you for sharing this story. I think it's very important for people all across the globe and around the world, and especially for those who come to Hawaii and to visit and to really understand the essence of the culture there. So thank you.
Thanks so much for your
Thank you.
interest.
Good. We're delighted. Yeah.
Mahalo.
I have to tell you, Carter, that one was very heartfelt to me because I don't know if you know this, but I call myself a Hawaiian. I was actually born in Oahu. So to hear about this journey and even learn more about this story, it really touched my heart.
Amazing interview. Really, I really enjoyed it. Thank you. And now, the team from Out.
My name's Stephen Hunter. I was the director of Out. My name is Max Sacker. I was the producer on Out, and yeah, good friend of Steve's for a long time.
Yes.
Yeah.
I did my homework and found out you guys worked together starting all the way back from Wall-E.
Yeah.
Long history.
Long time ago, yeah.
Many moons.
That was when I first joined Pixar. In 2007 is when I met Steve. I was a production assistant and he was an animation supervisor. And I think, yeah, that was the first time you were like, oh, we got to get you into the animation department. We got to work together.
Yep, got to get over here.
Yeah.
Come on. It's fun.
And that's so wonderful to be able to come back and work together on this short, right?
When we started making the short, I had David Lawley, the Spark Shorts, was helping me out early on. And then he brought up Max and I was like, yes, must work with Max.
Let's talk about Out. I mean, such an important and compelling film. Stephen, could you briefly tell us about the film and your inspiration behind it? Because I believe it's based on some of your own personal experience.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of it was definitely sort of like about, my own experience of coming out, but then wanting to make something a little bit more fantastical out of it, because that's what we do. I was like 27, 28 when I came out to my parents over the phone in a conference room at Pixar.
Oh, wow.
I had to call. Yeah, I broke my boyfriend and I broke up, and it was awful. I was a mess, and my mom's like, "What's wrong with you?" And I was like, "All right, fine."
Oh my God. And how were they about it?
The real coming out story is that I talked to the two of them. My dad was on one phone and my mom was on the other, and I told him, and I was talking for a bit, and then my mom was talking, and then I go, "Hey, Mom, where's Dad?" And she goes, "Oh, he went for ice cream." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And then I finished with my mom, and she's like, "You're my son. I love you no matter what." And then like half an hour later, my dad calls and he's like, "Hey, I just had to go get some ice cream, go for a walk. But you're my son. I love you no matter what," kind of thing. Just, that kind of stuff. But really, it was like, it was accepting right from the get-go. So I had a very fortunate coming out story. Like, there's a lot of gay men that I've spoken to that haven't. The families don't know how to have that conversation. They don't know how to talk about these things. And I think that was the biggest thing we wanted to get across, was that it's just talk about those feelings and what it's like.
Just look them in the eyes and say, "Mom, Dad, I'm..." Happy moving day!
Can we talk a little bit about the magical dog and cat duo and what the inspiration was behind those two characters? I mean, did you have a cat before as well, or where did this come from?
In the structure of the story, it comes from my love of like Twilight Zones. And in Twilight Zone episodes, Rod Serling would always introduce and end the episodes. Like, he would bookend them, and I was like, "Oh, I want that for this, because I want to set up the magic." Like Twilight Zone, something weird is going to happen. So I was like, I want to set up something weird is going to happen very quickly, because it's a short, you don't have a lot of time. So I was like, I wanted to introduce that. And then I also wanted that structure because I wanted to say, this is one coming out story. This is not like the coming out story. This is not everybody's. It's just one. It's one story. There could be others. We had an idea at the end of the film that you would see Mags and Gigi fly off on a rainbow, and then the camera would pan up and you'd see a town, and you'd see rainbows going down to different spots around, kind of thing, like, as if they're out there doing other things, right? The Mags and Gigi actually came from my brother, who's had a dog named Mags, this deaf pit bull, and then Gigi the cat. So that was kind of like, I just used them as my inspiration, and then put them on a rainbow, and there you go.
And it's an awesome little fairy tale.
But right. I'm like, I would love to have a Max and Gigi around.
Right.
I love that you've taken so many personal elements and incorporated them into the short film, because it adds to the magic of it, I think, to be able to experience all that.
That's what we do in our stories at Pixar, is we try to bring as much of our personality and a personal history into those films as we can. I mean, Soul, that barbershop sequence in Soul is absolutely incredible. And that's all from Kemp's experience of going to a barbershop in LA. And I'm like, man, it just feels so real and true. And you're like, that's what you want to put in these movies, right?
Yeah.
You can have taste, but it's true. It feels true.
Right.
You can kind of, even if it is a magical dog and cat on a rainbow, it feels true somehow.
Max, can you talk to us a little bit about the Spark Shorts program? There might be some listeners who don't know about this program, would love to know more about it, and how it kind of helps foster more creativity among the animators and other creatives at Pixar.
Yeah, so the Spark Shorts program is relatively new. I'd say it's about 4 years old, and it was kind of started as kind of like this incubator program, indie filmmaking within the walls of Pixar, right? Where the idea was to, find voices and storytellers from all different corners of the studio who might otherwise not get an opportunity to kind of be in the director's chair and kind of walk through their craft and talk through their stories. And they come from everywhere. I mean, Erica Milsom was one of the directors, and she comes from the documentary group, kind of like the behind the scenes group at Pixar. Edwin Chang is a simulation artist. Steve is an animator. We've had story artists. So they kind of pull from all different mediums, and you're given 6 months, a very small crew, small budget. It's a really great program that gives a platform to voices that, historically have kind of been underrepresented and then have a new chance to speak.
And I love that, Stephen, you've been able to share your story through this. I mean, I'm sure that's very important to you. Do you think we'll see other stories that highlight the LGBTQ community coming out from Disney and Pixar?
I sure hope so. We need more of them. We need more stories being told.
Absolutely agree with you on that. You guys, if you get nominated,
Serenity now.
This film will be theatrically distributed by ShortsTV. What would that mean to both of you to have this film be seen in a theatrical setting?
I'd love to see it in a theatrical setting.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. That's the other thing about these Spark Shorts films is, right, when it was first started, we didn't know where they were going to be played, right? It was kind of an in-house program. There was no Disney Plus. There was no release plan for it. we didn't know if we were just making these films that were going to be seen by our peers inside, hey, we're going to have a company meeting and we're going to share it with everyone and we hope you enjoy it. Now let's get back to work. So I don't know. You make these films with the dream of them ending up on the big screen, right? Because that's what they're intended for, right? But the world has changed. TV screens are okay too.
Yeah. It's a different experience.
Very different.
I'd love to hear your comments on, okay, so again, given your experience, both of your experience at Pixar, how do you decide on the type of artwork? Because I understand, you could go with 2D, you could use 3D.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the beauty of animation, right? Is there's just so many different ways that you can choose to tell the story. And I think for this one, Steve talked a lot about his inspiration of the little golden books, right? The old golden books that were illustrated sometimes by Mary Blair and kind of had this kind of children's book painterly quality to it. And so I think that was a way that we could add that fairy tale element to it to make it digestible for audiences all around. But again, a lot of it came down to what can we make in 6 months? Pixar films are known for kind of like their very high polished look. Like there's a lot of granular detail in there and it's beautiful. And, in 6 months with a crew of 12 people, it's harder to achieve that. And so it was kind of like this marriage of style and design, inspired by kind of those old golden books, but also what can we make? So kind of by design and kind of by force.
Like it's like any indie film. You're just trying to find your budget where you can, and you just try to do what you can with what you got. And then I think artistically, that's where, like Max's point, like some of this was about necessity. Like we had to come up with a style that was a little bit not house style where you had to polish every frame.
But that's the beauty of a loose paint stroke too, right? Like
Yeah.
there's something beautiful about a painting, how it's kind of slightly imperfect, right? And you take away from it what you want, which is like the meaning or whatever meaning you find out about it. You're less focused on how perfect that eye shape is, right? So
And there's a warmth in that too, there's a real warmth that comes through from that painting.
There were warmth in a lot of the colors you chose to use as well, I felt.
Yeah.
You know what's fascinating is your work at Pixar from the outside perspective. It's so glamorous, right? And it is. It's so phenomenal to see the works that come out of there. But how do you make yourself stand out in this sea of talent? I mean, has there ever been pressure during your years of working there to make sure you stand out or your work is seen? How do you navigate that?
Max, I feel like I guess I feel like the people I work with are so supportive of one another that there's not that competitiveness. There's not a feeling of like I got to show them up. There's that feeling of like,
yeah,
I'm doing the best I can and I'm putting myself out there, and then people go, "That's awesome. How about this?" And then everybody's lifting each other up. And I think that's the biggest thing of like even making this film. We put together our own little brain trust to help figure out how to make the story better and better. And that's what I love about working at Pixar is just this feeling of like you're in it together, even if you're working on different projects,
The teamwork.
the teamwork and everybody in the room has a voice, right? Steve is the director, I'm the producer, but everybody in the room, it's an open canvas. Everybody has an idea, and if it's an idea that everybody really can rally and get behind, then okay, let's all get behind it and put it up there.
Yeah.
So that's the beauty of collaboration.
What advice would both of you have for animators that are out there who want to come into this industry?
I think the biggest thing is to just focus on your own story and your own truth and make something that you want to make for yourself. And the more you do that, the more you stay true to that, then I think other people will see that and respond to it. Instead of the other way where you're just trying to please everybody, and just please and make what you think they want you to make, just get as much of yourself in your art as you can. And then people will respond to that.
From a personal space, I'm just going to add, it's such a powerful film to watch at so many levels,
Thank you so much,
whether you're a child or adult. And I'm going to fangirl and say, oh my God, I love Soul and Coco. And I'm just so fascinated by your talent and the creatives that you guys offer to the world. Because for someone who draws stick figures, it's amazing to see what you guys can come up with. So thank you.
You can do a lot with stick figures. I'm just going to say that.
Okay, well, I'm going to start challenging myself,
Yeah.
Steven. You've inspired me
There
to
you go.
challenge
There you go.
myself. So, Carter, I just love the cat and dog, Max and Gigi, at the beginning and at the end, of course. They have this magical element. I'd love to see more with them. I think they're so much fun.
Well, they're great. And really, it's an interesting way of telling a story, of using an outside device to kind of bring the viewer into the story and pull them all the way through. It's kind of the hidden through line of the story. Great device, really cleverly told story.
But Carter, I'm not sure I'd want to switch places with the dog for a day or even 5 minutes. Carter, have you been to Hawaii before?
Absolutely. Of course, I love Hawaii. It's such a fabulous place. But after Kapaemahu, I definitely will think of it differently. It's, everyone goes to Hawaii for the beauty and the beaches, but when the tourist side of it, the outdoor side of it. But one of the things when you're there that always sinks in is the cultural side. And I think one of the points that came out of the Kapaemahu interview, and certainly out of the film, is the importance of cultural preservation, of these ancient civilizations, really. So I walked away with that as a very big part of what this movie is about.
Oh, Carter, it makes me think twice too. And you recognize that the island itself has this strong spiritual essence to it. So even when I go again, it's going to make me rethink about how I look at things and understand them. And I definitely want to go see the stones and explore that area. Well, thank you everyone for joining us on another episode of the ShortsTV Podcast.
And don't forget to subscribe.